He very carefully and clearly noted that here at MCC we have a tent that is big enough for all of us, not in spite of our differences, but because of our differences. And so tonight we're going to talk about surviving that flood and the promise that was found in the rainbow, that God showed a commitment to Noah that there would never again be a flood so devastating that it would wipe out all but a chosen few. So I'm going to invite you to remember that tent that is big enough, that tent that is held open by the wide and broad and strong arms of our congregation. Because there are, in this real world, times when we find ourselves in the midst of potentially devastating crises. And it may feel impossible at those times to see any semblance of a rainbow. And it's at these times that being part of a sacred and a loving community is so important. It allows others to support you. It allows others to help you remember with the promise of that rainbow. We've all gone through periods of life where we have had great pain. And the horror or even the sheer terror of the incident or the moment seemed unbearable, much less surmountable. And these moments of floods, may they be breakups, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a family member, or some other life-shifting or shattering event, are great pain in which we need to remember this rainbow and our community. So tonight, I wanted to be very practical, and I wanted to give you tools to take away tonight that my experience and my mentors have shared with me to help you weather through that next flood. Now, for those of you who know me, and we've already had some comments on the peanut gallery over here, but for those of you who know me, I was a little bit of a precocious child. And so my parents spent a lot of time correcting me. You see, I couldn't ever understand why I couldn't play at the beach on my own, or why I couldn't stay in the park with my friends after dark, or why those shiny new Henkel Troken knives that she had just got were play toys. And it took me age, it took me experience, and it took me wisdom to recognize that those no's and those child crises were in fact filled with love. Does everybody know who Reverend Troy Perry is? This is a test. If you don't know who Reverend Troy Perry is, you might be in trouble. Oof. This is his autobiography, which is called The Lord is My Shepherd, and He Knows I'm Gay. And it's a wonderful little book. And had Reverend Troy Perry not been thrown out of the Baptist, his home, had he not been so devastated that he attempted suicide, we might not have this denomination today. In fact, look around you. This church, this community may not exist except for the dark valley which Troy had to walk through. Take some time and read his book. It will help you build this foundation. After the bathhouse raids here in 1981, some of the men who were found in committed suicide. Had that not happened, it is quite possible our community never would have coalesced with the strength it did to fight with Reverend Hawks for human rights for GBLTQI people, who may have never had the cohesiveness to tackle the AIDS crisis. And today in the news, what is it, the fourth or fifth child, teenager we've just heard about who has committed suicide for anti-gay bullying? Now, I don't get that. And I'm telling you, I can't see right now the rainbow in that. And this is times when I need you, my community, to support me as I try and make sense of something I do not have the wisdom to understand, to believe in God, to believe in a love, concepts that are so critical to our existence, yet they're overwhelming and they're complex and they're beyond our understanding. And I may never get why these kids had to kill themselves. But I do hold a faith in a God that loves us so much she's granted us free will, that loves us so much that she holds a bigger plan than I may understand. And in these times of pain and frustration, I look to you, to my community, to hold that tent big enough, to provide the lifeboat that I may need when my flood waters rise. I struggled whether to share this story with you tonight because it's very personal. But that's what we do when we care for each other. So I'm going to tell you a story tonight about how my friends and community built a very strong foundation for me. I was very fortunate to be born into a wonderful family. Great mom, dad, 3 sisters, only boy, much to my father's chagrin. And my dad, he was a hero to me. He worked really hard to provide for us, and he always made certain that I attained those milestones in life that were so important. He handed me over to my grandfather to be baptized, and there in that very special suit, there I am being confirmed by the bishop. He spent countless summer days on our beach playing with me. He rewarded me with my first puppy, Monty. He spent so much time with me that he even managed to weather my 3-year-old attempt at drag. That's a dad, folks. As I grew older, he took me diving. We went sailing across the Mediterranean. We went cruising through the Bahamas. I loved this guy dearly. It was the summer of 2004. I hadn't seen my family in months. I was building a yacht. I used to be a ship captain. I was building a yacht on the east coast of England when my sister Gail finally got hold of me. She was sobbing on the phone, and when the sobs finally stopped, she said, "Todd, there's no good way to tell you this. Last night, Dad had a heart attack at the hospital, and he's dead." I had to spend the next month looking at this tombstone and coping with my family, and I was in shock. Somehow I did mobilize within 12 hours I got from England to Ontario cottage country, and I held this supportive demeanor while the rest of my family crumbled. My mother was so devastated, she slid into deep Alzheimer's and has never returned. And a month or 2 later, I finally returned to work. And I couldn't help but notice, you know what? I wasn't sad. I hadn't cried, and I felt so terribly guilty. How could this man that I love so dearly, how could this man that was such a part of my life die? And I could have days full of sunshine and rainbows. And eventually, I came to understand that someone who loved me had, on a very sunny day, helped me build a foundation in this horrible flood. That, my friends, is my angel. That is Therese Hetherington. That woman is a walking hug. And when she married a very dear friend, I took them sailing on their honeymoon. And as we got back to the dock and she got off the boat, my father got to join me for a week of sailing. And they just met. And my dad and I met on the dock, and we did one of those man hugs. You know what I mean? Here, Randy, stand up. You'll be good at this. It's a man hug. Come on, buddy boy. All right, so here's how the man hug goes. You don't really want to touch this guy, right? So we lean in, and you got to inflict just enough pain that it's not too intimate. And so Trez watched this. And Trez, being Trez, walks up to my father and says, "You are so lucky to have a son that loves you this much." Now understand, my father had no framework to deal with an intimate statement like that in a public space, and he just kind of stood there. And she turned to me and said, "And you, Todd, are so lucky to have a father to go sailing with. And that is not how you hug somebody you love." And she grabbed us both up in those arms, and she pulled us together, and she buried us in a bear hug, and she whispered, "That's how you hug somebody you love." And oh, that wasn't good enough for Trez. She backed up, and she made us practice right there on the dock till she was sure she got that man hug right out of us. And what's so amazing about that is on this bright, warm and sunny day, I was building a foundation of love. So here I was years later, struggling with not feeling devastated over my father's death, when a spiritual director, a mentor of mine, finally unpacked it for me. He said, Todd, your relationship with your dad was complete. You didn't have anything left unsaid. You didn't have anything left undone. And had you known on that day that you left the family house that you would never see your father again, you would have done just what you did. You would have said, I love you, and you would have given him a hug. And indeed, we had. We spoke the words, I love you. We shared a genuine hug. And Therese loved us so much that she had taught me on that bright sunny day to build a foundation so that the storm that ensues, I will still be able to see the rainbow. So I hope that tonight, in sharing that story, that I've left you with a couple of learnings here. One, please use the sunny days. There are good times. Invest in them to build a strong foundation in God and in your faith. And two, invest. Invest in what you call family. Invest in what you call friends. Love them. Spend time with them. Tell them, for God's sake, tell them you love them. Don't miss building your foundation. It's important that we point out these rainbows even when the sun shines. And it's important to be the witness for others when they cannot see the rainbows. Be part of building this tent. Make it big enough to hold all of us because of our differences. Make it big enough to shelter the lifeboats those you love may need. Because I am certain that t-shirt actually meant to say, floods happen. My friends, go forward today being blessed with the day that we have so that we can create new and more beautiful tomorrows. Amen.